This is your class live recording for Project A Decade of Crisis. So quick overview. This is an essay, but it's not going to be horrible and horrific for you. So the first thing I want to talk about is picking your thesis. And initially, the best question to ask yourself is, what is this essay asking me to do? How do I pick a thesis? And this is a direct quote from the assignment. It says, using 3 events from the 1970s, write an essay of 600 words or more that explains why the 1970s could appropriately be called a decade of crisis. So this isn't necessarily an argument paper, but this does need to be proving a point. And the point you're going to make is that the 1970s were a decade of crises, and your essay is going to prove that. So I don't want you to think necessarily that this is an argumentative paper so much as a persuasive essay. For an introduction, I highly recommend starting with historical context. We had come out of the 1960s where there was revolution and this concept of love and Beatles music and that sort of thing, into really a very kind of scandalous time. You know, in the 60s we had Camelot with Kennedy and this very kind of romanticized period. And I think the 70s was more of a eye-opening decade, where we kind of got to see the dirty, ugly part of humanity. So try to include in your first couple sentences some historical context, that when we compare the 1970s to other decades in the 1900s, it is kind of fraught with bad things. And then, of course, your main points, and then your thesis. Again, remember, your thesis needs to have some sort of commentary about why the 1970s are considered, or could be considered, a decade of crisis. Now, for your body paragraphs, these are 6 suggestions for you to use for your body paragraphs. You don't have to use these 6 or any combination of these. Remember, this essay asked you to select 3 events, so you do need to pick at least 3. Pick some from this list, pick additional events, if you can think of others, that really display the kind of conflict that you're looking for. So of course we have Watergate, which really kind of destroyed the American vision of the presidency and how the president should behave. The Arab-Israeli War, which kind of really kick-started things in the Middle East. We had the oil crisis happen, where it just wasn't readily available anymore, the fall of Saigon and kind of the ending of Vietnam, the Great Recession that happened during the 70s, and the Iran hostage crisis, where they were kept as long as, I believe it was Carter was in office. The Iranian government decided that they wouldn't release the American hostages. So these are just, like I said, just a couple of the big ones. If you have other ones in mind that you'd like to talk about for conflicts, that's fine. But these 6 really embody the concept of conflict in the 70s. When it comes time to write about your body paragraphs, make sure you include a good amount of historical information about each thing. When you're talking about Watergate, you need to talk about President Nixon and the hotels and all the other bad things that were going on at that time. And so when you're writing these essays, you need to make sure that you're covering the important facts of each item. Remember, a good strong paragraph should be 5 or 6 sentences, so that's what I'm looking for. Don't be afraid to write more. There's no bonus points for being brief. When you come time to write your conclusion, summarize your main points, restate your thesis, and then wrap it all up. This could be wrapped up by talking about a comparison between the 60s and 70s, talking about the transition into the 80s and what kind of decade the 80s were for the world. So there are a lot of ways you can go with your conclusion, but as long as it flows really well, that's what you need to look for as your conclusion, is does it feel like it belongs well with this essay? Some final thoughts for you. Please format correctly. Size 12, Times New Roman, indent your paragraphs, don't center your paragraphs, don't goof with your margins, no fancy fonts. I know it makes it a little more fun and creative, but when it comes to essay writing, we're not looking for something that looks like it's all fancy designy. Cite your sources. You will probably do research for this project. Cite your sources. Tell me where this information is coming from. Give credit, don't plagiarize. When you're finished reading or writing your essay, reread your essay. If it feels choppy or not cohesive or doesn't flow well, don't be afraid to rewrite. It's good to rewrite. You should rewrite. Um, and remember that the whole purpose of this essay is you proving that you know what you're talking about. If you reread your essay and it feels vague or it doesn't seem like it proves that you know that the 70s were kind of a decade of crisis, it's probably time to do some rewriting. I am more than happy to help you edit, revise, rewrite, whatever it is you need to do. Just reach out to me and let me know. So if you have any questions, again, let me know. Otherwise, good luck, happy writing, and I will see you in class.